Over the piano was printed the notice, "Please do not shoot the pianist. He is doing his best." Oscar Wilde, writing in Impressions of America, Leadville. I guess in the days before the 20th century, musicians had to worry about that sort of thing. If someone in the audience didn't like what they were hearing, it would have been easy for them to stand, draw a gun, and play the part of the ultimate critic. Elton John titled one of his albums with a play on Wilde's words, "Don't shoot me, I'm only the piano player." Thankfully, we've progressed far beyond that point today, unless the pianist sits down on his bench in a quiet lounge to play Feelings. I promise you, the piano players you will hear over the course of this program will honor any request except Feelings with the heartbeat of the internet. This was the title of a book by Jacques Seguela, who was born in 1934. Don't tell my mother I work in advertising. She thinks I'm a piano player in a brothel. Wonder what kind of piano player he is. You can't blame him if he isn't very good, especially if he was forced into it by a mother who made him take lessons and practice on warm days when he would have much rather been out playing baseball or seeking adventure with his friends. The one piece he probably didn't have any problem learning would have been the one that almost all of us can play: Chopsticks. Chopsticks was composed on August 1st, 1877, and music students are still learning to play it by rote. I thought we might listen to some good piano players, maybe ask for a request or two, and enjoy some of the songs from his or her repertoire, with the heartbeat of the internet. The Animals' classic song, House of the Rising Sun, reminds me of the title of a book by Jacques Seguela. Don't tell my mother I work in advertising. She thinks I'm a piano player in a brothel. In November 1996, Dee Dee Ball, a 79-year-old jazz musician making her theater debut as a spirit passing into heaven, played her last note on the piano and died on stage of an apparent heart attack. End quote. She was playing a local theater in California. A friend was quoted in the Examiner as saying, "It was the most beautiful death I've ever seen." End quote. It had been a lifelong dream of hers to play before an admiring audience. I wonder if the brooding Schroeder ever dreamed of playing Beethoven on his toy piano in front of a more appreciative audience than the Peanuts gang. Schroeder reminds me of this story. It's called A Little Boy at a Big Piano. Wishing to encourage her young son's progress on the piano, a mother took her boy to a Paderewski concert. After they were seated, the mother spotted a friend in the audience and walked down the aisle to greet her. Seizing the opportunity to explore the wonders of the concert hall, the little boy rose and eventually explored his way through a door marked "No Admittance." When the house lights dimmed and the concert was about to begin, the mother returned to her seat and discovered that the child was missing. Suddenly, the curtains parted and spotlights focused on the impressive Steinway on stage. In horror, the mother saw her little boy sitting at the keyboard innocently picking out "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." At that moment, the great piano master made his entrance, quickly moved to the piano, and whispered in the boy's ear, "Don't quit. Keep playing." Then, leaning over, Paderewski reached down with his left hand and began filling in a bass part. Soon, his right arm reached around to the other side of the child, and he added a running obbligato. Together, the old master and the young novice transformed a frightening situation into a wonderfully creative experience. The audience was mesmerized. That's the way it is in life. What we can accomplish on our own is hardly noteworthy. We try our best, but the results aren't exactly graceful flowing music. But when we trust in the hands of greater power, our life's work truly can be beautiful. Next time you set out to accomplish great feats, listen carefully. You can hear the voice of the master whispering in your ear. Don't quit. Keep playing. A century ago, at a time before radio and television, an upper-class family might gather in the parlor at twilight after the evening meal to listen to one of the parents or children play some music on the highly polished grand piano, or maybe even a more common upright. Neil Abbott, in his poem What Home Is, fondly remembers an old piano and the warmth its music made in the home he grew up in. And the old piano, someone was always ready to play it when I wanted to sing. The room would be made comfortable in the light of a few lamps, and they would relax on the settee, close their eyes, and listen to their favorite melodies. George Eliot in the book Daniel Deronda takes us beyond the iron gate and into one estate. We can hear the first few notes as they echo across the manicured lawns and out into the street. Now, this piano has seen better days, but it's not the instrument that the invited guest is so much concerned with. There is something about this piano player that invites closer inspection, and I quote, "She immediately arose and went to the piano, a somewhat worn instrument that seemed to get better of its infirmities under the firm touch of her small fingers as she preluded." Deronda placed himself where he could see her while she sang, and she took everything as quietly as if she had been a child going to breakfast. Imagine her. It is always good to imagine a human creature in whom bodily loveliness seems as properly one with the entire being as the bodily loveliness of those wondrous transparent orbs of life that we find in the sea. Imagine her, with her dark hair brushed from her temples, but yet showing certain tiny rings there which had cunningly found their own way back, the mass of it hanging behind just to the nape of the little neck in curly fibers, such as renew themselves at their own will after being bathed into straightness like that of water grasses. Then see the perfect cameo her profile makes, cut in a duskish shell, whereby some happy fortune there pierced a gem-like darkness for the eye and eyebrow. The delicate nostrils defined enough to be ready for sensitive movements, the finished ear, the firm curves of the chin and neck entering into the expression of a refinement which was not feebleness. End quote. These are just some of the things we remember about certain piano players who transcend the music played. On the other side of town, near the docks, the lower classes would congregate at an alehouse and listen to some rather bawdy renditions of their favorite drinking songs, hammered out on an old upright piano that has had maybe one too many beers spilled all over it. D.H. Lawrence, from a poem called Piano from 1916, seems to have been in one of these beer halls, because he wrote, "So now it is vain for the singer to burst into clamor with the great black piano appassionato. The glamour of childish days is upon me. My manhood is cast down in the flood of remembrance. I weep like a child for the past." The date was February 10th, 1863. The great showman P.T. Barnum hosted the wedding of two little people, General Tom Thumb and Mercy Warren. In order to greet their guests, bride and groom had to stand on a piano. Piano has been part of many wedding ceremonies, but I would imagine this was the first time it was used in the receiving line at the reception. Another thought came to mind after reading an Associated Press article that originally ran in the Washington Post that had to do with the music that once accompanied The Little Tramp. You may have seen black and white excerpts of Charlie Chaplin's clown going through his routine on the silver screen, accompanied by a lone piano player who watched the screen to match his playing with the action. A piano was the only voice heard for many silent films. And in another private home late this past century, a woman has her bags packed by the door, ready to make a quick, calculated escape. But someone unseen seats himself in front of the keys of a baby grand and plays the first few notes of a fondly remembered love song, unleashing a flood of memories, both good and bad. Sometimes that's all it takes to keep someone from completing their plan and walking out the door. A piano played in the dark. In a very old edition of the Britannica was this. It is told in ancient legend that the throne of Pluto, king of the underworld, was fittingly carved of ebony wood as black as the darkest night. Ebony wood takes a high polish and is used chiefly in cabinet work and in the manufacture of instruments and piano keys. The wood was a favorite among kings for scepters and small statues. It was said that the great song and dance man Fred Astaire could make anything dance, including hat racks and pianos. And I like this quote. It's from an unknown author. Love is like playing the piano. First, you must learn to play by the rules. Then you must forget the rules and play from the heart. G.A. Studdert Kennedy, in something called I Believe, wrote that he thought music was a strange thing. He wrote, and I quote, Beethoven sits up, deaf, and the music of the Moonlight Sonata sings itself in his head. He takes wood pulp and some black liquid and a bit of steel and makes blobs and lines and scratches on it. He dies, gets buried, and my friend comes into the drawing room and sits down at a big lump of wood with some wires and hammers inside. He pulls out a music book, looks at it, beats the notes that work the hammers, and there floats out upon the air the same stream of delicious sounds that sang themselves in the brain of Beethoven. And I sit here and see again moonlight on still water shining, and hear the rippling of a little stream, and feel the touch of summer air. This was in one of my very old editions of the Britannica, and again I quote, Beethoven was the first composer to bring about a wider use of the piano. Before his time, most of the music written for keyboard instruments was filled with graceful trills and runs. These were particularly suited to the harpsichord and clavichord. In contrast, Beethoven put into his music many massive chords and slow, sustained melodies. These called for the lower, richer tones of the piano. After that time, many great composers wrote music for the piano. Its literature is more varied than that of any other instrument. The composers Frédéric Chopin and Franz Liszt and Clara Schumann, wife of the composer Robert Schumann, were among the first great performers on the piano. The first piano made in the United States was built by John Barend of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1775. Improvements were later added by Henry Steinway, a German who came to live in New York City. Finally, this item that appeared in the February 14th, 1997 issue of the industry trade publication Radio and Records. A close source told the Inquirer early that year that when Preacher's daughter, Toni Braxton, has time to relax, she likes to strip naked, light up a cigar, and play the piano. End quote. You know, to me, it does not matter whether you sit naked at the keys or, as Fred Astaire was known to do, dance with your piano. All that matters is that we strive to produce more beautiful music from this most complex of musical instruments. Good night, sweet dreams. I'm Don Jackson.